I'm Mark Gagan and you're listening to the Voice of Insurance podcast, produced in association with Advantage Go, enabling enterprise-scale underwriting through a single pane of glass. Today's podcast is a first for the Voice of Insurance. It's the first time we've done an outside broadcast. And the reason is a special one. David Howden started what was then Howden Pangbourne just over 30 years ago with two others, and famously, a dog, in a tiny office on St Dunstan's Hill in London. Today, that business is around 6,300 times bigger in terms of staff numbers and is infinitely larger in terms of revenue and has become a major global insurance and reinsurance operator working all over the world. I'd been trying to get David back on the show for a while, as it had already been 2 years since his last appearance alongside Rod Fox after the acquisition of TigerRisk. The message came back that he might be tempted to do it as long as we could do something different. So this is indeed completely different. David and I met up at St Dunstan's one morning 2 weeks ago and went for a walk around the insurance district of London we both know so well, taking in the sights, but also all of Howden's 5 current and historical London head offices along the way. Inevitably, we get a bit of a history lesson and hear lots of insightful stories and some fun anecdotes from along the amazing Howden entrepreneurial journey of the last 3 decades amid a fast-changing London and international insurance market. But far more importantly, we also discuss the core issues affecting the present and the future of that market and how Howden is positioning itself within it. Howden Re, Dual and the MGA boom, the big question over whether Howden might enter US retail broking, ongoing broking consolidation, big capital questions around what structures make the most sense as Howden continues to scale, the firm's latest 30/30 strategic plan and other key decisions facing the Howden Group now and over the decades to come all get comprehensively dealt with. There's nothing like a good walk for opening up a better quality of conversation. David's passion and enthusiasm are fizzling through every second of this fun and all-encompassing discussion. If you want to know how David got this far, do listen on. You'll learn an awful lot. But I think a better reason for carrying on listening will be to hear where he's heading in the next few years and how he plans to get there. By the time we close our conversation in Dave's wine bar at the foot of Howden's current HQ, you'll be much wiser, but probably needing a sit down and a cup of coffee as much as I was. Come for a walk with David and I. I promise it'll be fun. Enjoy the podcast. David.
Mark.
I can't believe it. We're standing outside Pinnacle House, your very first office as Howden Pangbourne as it was then. So tell us about what sort of dates were you here and what happened when you were here?
Yeah, Mark, so here we are, Pinnacle House, opposite the beautiful Wren Church in St Dunstan's Hill, which was, of course, burnt in the Great Fire of London and then actually bombed out in the Second World War. So now it's rather a nice garden, which is quite useful, actually, Mark, there's a garden here, because this is where myself, Mark Pangbourne and Louise Cable-Alexander came and first started the business back in November 1994. 16th of November 1994, we moved in here with one very important member of the staff, which was Flight, my dog. As you know, Flight used to come to the office, and therefore it was useful having this nice recreational garden opposite.
As a junior broker, my job was near Christmas was to deliver wine. It would be around this time of year, actually, delivering nice Rioja to our suppliers and friends in the marketplace. And of course, that was my job. I remember climbing up. I think you were up the stairs anyway, and I'm not sure you had any lifts. I think you've got a lift now, but it didn't feel like you had a lift at the time.
No, I think you did walk up the stairs. And the receptionist was the dog as well. It was a very small. And of course, we started the business back then because there'd been a lot of consolidation in the market, and we'll probably talk about that, Mark, when we talk about, you
had been at Regis Low, SBJ, Regis Low.
Yes, I started at Howden's, which of course got bought by A&A. Then I went to Nelsonhurst and Marsh, who got bought by Citicorp. And then I went to Regis Low, who got bought by SBJ.
And that's where Nelsonhurst you met Brian Marsh.
That's where I met Brian Marsh, who was my very first investor. He had 25% that he paid £25,000 for.
Wow. That's probably one of the most legendary investments because, of course, he wasn't out until about, 2014 or something?
He was in for a very long time, actually. He stayed on. In 2008, we bought in 3i. We stayed on as an investor, then eventually sold out when General Atlantic came in, yes.
That's amazing. So how many years were you here?
Well, we weren't here very long. 3 of us moved in, and actually 20 of us moved out. Just 3 years later, actually. We'd built the business up, and so we moved off, to Phoebe House. Which
was certainly my early memories, yes. You are D&O broker of choice, doing wholesale business on our behalf. And I suppose that's what I first knew you for, and that's how you started in the business. Probably by the time you left, you were doing more than just D&O.
Well, so when we started exactly that, we started as a wholesale broker. Gilligan Howell were one of our big clients. And, we also had another broker we'll talk about, which was Big Alan, Richard Elias. But we were a wholesale broker specialising in PI and D&O, really, Mark, because we didn't have any of our own distribution. So we had to rely on other brokers for distribution. And I'm sure we'll talk about distribution as we go along this journey.
Well, I suppose you're always going to rely on your skill and your wits, but at the same time, if you can have the distributions, it's even better.
Yeah, absolutely. We had expertise, really great expertise. We had lots of energy and lots of drive when we owned the business, which was great. We were building around culture, but we needed other people really to help us get to the clients. And of course, as the smallest broker in the world on the day we started up, we couldn't rock up to clients and say, look, come and use us. So we used brokers like Gilligan Howell or Richard Elias, Business Big Island, to actually find our clients as a classic wholesale broker.
So what was the best thing about this office? Was it having the park opposite so you can have a sandwich?
Having the park opposite for the dog was very useful. No,
it's a good location.
It's a great location as well, actually. And I think, actually, a very famous or infamous insurance man, Mr. Moran, was here at one stage.
Right.
Yeah, I think that is the case.
Also, it was difficult to get office space then. A lot of people were sort of in the East End. Or sort of, halfway to Shoreditch.
And remember, it was a very difficult time in the market, Mark. We were right in the middle of reconstruction and the renewal. Roland and the team were really trying to secure the survival of Lloyd's at the time. So it was an interesting time. And of course, you look here in this building, as we're going to walk, we'll see, the city wasn't exactly booming in London in those days.
No, it wasn't. I mean, it's unbelievable. I had a bit of a senior moment the other day. Let's start walking.
Yeah.
I was hoping we didn't get huge girders about to drop on our heads.
And there's Minster Court, of course, where actually I moved from Minster Court. We moved our offices manually by hand. We walked them down in to move them from SPJ down here when we started.
We're going to have to watch out for some old girders being taken out of it.
Gotham City, as it's known, Mark.
Well, it'd be nice. The city's amazing. I was walking down Fenchurch Street the other day and I realised that every single building, apart from the pub, which is probably Grade 1 listed, East India Arms, on Fenchurch Street, every single one has been rebuilt, and because the last one is the old Norwich Union one, which is being done now. But it was absolutely amazing. We're going to take a left here, aren't we?
Well, I think we'll talk about that a bit when we come to some of the other buildings. But of course, the reality was that the city, for a while, had a real problem with building new businesses, and that was because of the bombings, the terrorism. You remember?
Of course.
And it was, of course, actually the formation of Paul Re, that really enabled actually developers to have the confidence to start building these amazing businesses in the city. And the Gherkin being the first one.
And we were lucky that at least they would try not to damage too many humans because they'd let them off at the weekend.
That's right.
I was there for the second one.
Yeah, I was there for that. Mark and I were actually, I think, in this building when it went off and we heard it. It was down.
You were working at the weekend.
Yes, of course we were. When you start up business, you work weekends, nights, whenever you can. Yeah.
While we're walking on the high street, so I want to ask you about a high street question, because you're on my high street, which is amazing, in Wimbledon, southwest London. And in fact, I was delivering my daughter's university in Exeter, and you're on that high street as well. With the A-Plan acquisition, now rebranded fully as Howden, it's great to see one of the names that I know that I can now explain to people who don't know anything about insurance, and they ask me what I do. So, I'm going to interview that chap, David Howden, who's actually in your high street. Anyway, how's that going?
It's going incredibly well. We are opening more. We've got 200 offices in the UK, over 100 on the high streets. We've got offices from Yeovil right up to Turriff up in the north of Scotland. And it's very important that. And, we started earlier, Mark, talking about distribution. And actually, what I've worked out as I build this business is really important to build your distribution. And that, for us in the UK, that means being close to our clients. So literally being on the high street. When others are closing their high streets, we're opening more. We're finding that, if we can get close to our clients and bring the expertise we've talked about, then we're going to grow our business very fast.
So you're finding it's not just personal lines, you're getting small corporates coming in and saying, I want some proper coverage, or I want someone to explain to me what I actually need.
Absolutely. It's everything from the personal lines right through to the builders and the decorators, the local accountants, the local lawyers, right the way through to the professionals, but then the larger businesses. We want to be the go-to place for any personal business in the UK. Why wouldn't we? We've got over 6,500 people here now. We're a great British story, and we want to be, seen as someone that is offering something different. So for me, it's really important, the fact that we're actually close to our clients, but bringing expertise, So what did it do? Joining up A-Plan and Howden, it was about how we could then bring the expertise that Howden has, and put it into the high street in order to service clients. So your point exactly, Mark, we're now not just focusing on the household and the cars, but we're focused on the local community. How can we bring their products? We've launched our new cyber product for them. How can we do local PI, D&O products? Are there other specialty classes? So it's really about really getting close to your clients, but bringing them expertise.
Sorry to interrupt your tour of London with Mark and David, but we wanted to let you know that many of today's themes will be covered at Tintech London Market on February the 4th.
Hosted by the Insurance Network, Tintech London Market is a one-day conference exploring how technology is driving change and enabling business and operating models of the future.
From Gen AI and smart underwriting to aligning culture and technology, you'll hear cutting-edge insights from speakers from Hiscox, HDI, Mosaic, Key, Howden, and more, and take part in roundtable discussion, benchmarking sessions, and of course, networking.
Don't miss Tintech London Market. Search Tintech London Market to discover the full agenda and speaker lineup.
Now, back to the chat.
So let's start walking. Let's test the adage that no broker has ever been run over on Eastcheap or Fenchurch or Leadenhall Street or Bishopsgate. The universe has never allowed that to happen. I've thought that you can cross without looking. We've got some stories about regulation, and we've got a new UK government saying lots of really nice things about the insurance industry, wanting us to be part of the UK's growth strategy and core part. What do you think they have to do? There's some good noises about making regulation but have an eye to competitiveness. And it's a secondary provision at the moment. How much more do you think they have to do? I mean, you don't need much encouragement. You're already getting on and doing things, whatever the regulatory environment, are you?
Yeah, but I think if you take another example, look at the London Stock Exchange. Today it's about 4% of quoted companies on the London Stock Exchange. It was about mid-teens not that long ago, and the viability of the city is absolutely crucial, and we're lucky in insurance that we are still by far the leading market. But the reality is that since the 2008 financial crisis, there has been an ever-increasing amount of regulation, which in my view has stifled growth in the city. And you look at our counterparts across the Atlantic, the size of the American banks since then, their relevance. We have to make sure that we are encouraging growth, and that it is about businesses. Obviously, us as business people get on, grow our businesses, well, do what we need to do, but we do need a regulatory environment that encourages that as well.
We're just about to walk past Fidelis Partnership, big MGU, and obviously something really amazing that's never happened before, an insurance company that's split it away from its own balance sheet to become an MGA. And of course, you're a real MGA pioneer, and probably because when you started Dual, MGAs were not necessarily flavour of the decade, were they? But you had a vision of professionalising that with some of my former colleagues actually as well, which was great. And again, getting that distribution, getting close to those clients. What do you think of the boom that we've had? Certainly in the last 5 or 6 years, it's been incredible, probably the whole decade. Do you think Dual, is it booming as much as some of the others? It doesn't seem to be growing as fast as the others, but is that conscious now that you've already got scale?
So I think you're absolutely right. We started Dual back, as you well know, in 1997 because with the consolidation of the market. That lesson we learned all those time at St Dunstan's Hill, we need to control distribution. Richard Last was going to sell his business to Willis's. That's why we bought Spig Island. Gilligan Howell sold to Pat Ryan and Aon, and that's when we set up Dual back in 97. And I often say in those days, MGAs were thought more like a bit like the chewing gum at the bottom of the shoe. People were all disdainful about them. And now, of course, they've come, massively on from there. And we had to change the rules, you probably remember, Mark,
because it didn't
Spain.
actually
It didn't exist, exactly. Yeah. So we've come a huge way since then. They are a key part of the market. I think they've been key actually in the development of a lot of the interesting products that are driving growth in the market. You look at a lot of the areas like cyber. Obviously, as you remember, that CFC was actually born within Howden back actually in 2000. So you look at cyber, you look at warranty, indemnity. Many of these areas are where MGAs have been really at the forefront of the innovation of products and development markets. For us, Dual now, it's a very substantial business. It writes $3.5 billion of premium. We're in 21 countries around the world. We're a truly international MGA. We haven't done many acquisitions in Dual. That has been deliberate. You've seen us being quite acquisitive, as you know, Mark, on the broking side.
Big deal in the US, though.
Yes, we did a deal with Kieran Sweeney in line in the US. Well, we are tending to focus on organic growth and attracting talent in Dual and not really focusing on lots of M&A. It's harder, in my view, to buy underwriting agencies where you're sure there's going to be a strong cultural fit and alignment of business, etc., compared to doing it with brokers. So that's why you'll see us more focused on the organic growth with Dual.
So it's more about making sure you can be one of the best places for those underwriters to come.
Yeah, and Julie's very much an underwriting business. I mean, it's Rick Clapham's the CEO. These are businesses that focus on very much underwriting profit and professional. That it's not a distribution business, and so we have a different focus than about some other MGAs. It's very long term. I often say to our capacity providers, the good news about Jule, we've been around for 27, 28 years. We'll be around for another 28 years, and I think it is, I would suggest, in a different league from many of the other MGAs that have blossomed recently.
What do you think about that? I mean, obviously, whenever anyone grows quickly in insurance, they're always raised eyebrows. I mean, you're raising your eyebrows. I mean, but you've grown quickly and you've done fine. So it is possible. So, and there are lots of theses about why it's happening that way, and reinsurers obviously be happy to back these vehicles.
Well, one thing we're standing here, Mark, outside Lloyd's, and if you go back to when we were first in this industry, Lloyd's Syndicate had no corporate capital in it, really. It was bought in part of R&R, and that's when it came in. And I think that was very important for the market. It was needed for the market. But the reality is it did mean that some of the entrepreneurial spirit and the ability to do a startup syndicate and be an entrepreneur was taken out of the market. And I think MGAs have been very successful at replacing that with people saying, actually, I want to go and build a business. I want to do it fast. I'm going to start an MGA and get capital behind me. So absolutely, I celebrate the success of them.
And probably, would you say it's right that also co-aligns with a lot of reinsurers finding it difficult to access that sort of business because that's consolidated into those global top 10 insurers who are top 10 insurers in every territory in the world. And a lot of those reinsurers probably used to have 183 different treaties with all the different components of whatever has now made up AXA, but now it would all be reinsured out of France. And so they don't get access to a lot of more ballast, kind of steady, lower limit, proportional type business that they used to get.
We're going back again, Mark, to the whole thing about expertise and distribution. Everyone needs distribution ultimately. If there isn't an ultimate client at the end of the policy, there is no policy, yeah? So everyone's looking for distribution and different ways of getting that distribution. And MGAs are very successful at getting that distribution. They employ expertise. And I don't think it's just reinsurance companies that are concerned about distribution. I think it's insurance companies that are concerned about distribution. I think Lloyd's is concerned about distribution. So I think MGAs offer expertise and distribution to a whole number of capital providers that find them very useful in the marketplace.
And I suppose they're also a really good way of innovating. We're talking about fast follow and all these other things, but of course, anytime you're already arranging your followers, aren't you? In an MGA, you have your followers, you have your paper. It's a consortium in another way, like all these things. You are syndicating that risk, and also so you're allowing those carriers to have a bit of a little nibble on a cherry to see if they like it or not, in a way that is not going to be life-threatening to them if it goes wrong, for example.
I think that's right, and I come back to the point. I think that's why MGAs have been good at innovation, because, syndicates or insurance companies have been taking a smaller share of the risk, have a syndicated market, which is, let's be honest, that was the foundations of the Lloyd's market itself, to be able to share that risk around. You talk about now consortia, huge growth on consortia. It's a very important part of the market. The syndication allows innovation, in my view.
Right, let's keep walking. You need to lead the way, because you'll remember where this is.
Yeah, I remember. So we're now walking past what was the original skyscraper in the city, the only one, rather boring. It was the
I think it's
Norwich Union building at the time.
For the demolition yard,
It's the demolition yard, yeah.
We're going to go down here in 10 minutes.
We're going to get back in time now, aren't we?
While we're on the way, why don't we talk about something that's more current? Howden Re, going really well, right?
Howden Re has been a huge success. We of course formed the view that there was a genuine need for a new reinsurance broker in the market. We did the deal with Rod Fox and his colleagues, and at the time Rod and I said there's people who wouldn't join Howden or wouldn't join Tiger that's going to join what was Howden Tiger and now Howden Re, and that's happened in droves. So we've now created it's
an extra 50% of staff, if my maths is correct, because I think
there's
Tim
nearly
said
1,000 staff now.
Tim Ronda was on the show and he said we're about 1/3 Tiger, 1/3 previous legacy Howden Re, and now we're 1/3 people who came from other places recently.
Yes, and we're sort of 3 times the size in revenue as well. It's just short of $600 million revenue in Howden Re. It's created properly another true global reinsurance broker, and I think that's incredibly important. Back to the need both for talent, the people who've joined us, quite frankly, and as you say, a lot of talents have joined us, but also for clients. How many markets would there be where really there's only sort of 3 proper players offering an alternative? I think,
So now you can really say that the idea of challenger is really sort of for the birds, or that's for other people to say that you're not really a challenger anymore. You've actually arrived. You've challenged and you've managed to make a space for yourself, a very big space.
I think we would absolutely say that. We talk about being one of 4 global reinsurance brokers, and there'll be areas back to our earlier conversation, Mark, well, we're absolutely the leader. If you look at the space we've been talking about now, MGAs, MGUs, we've got a far bigger market share than our competitors. It's a real focus of ours. And we've also got something really unique in Howden Re, which we've got a proper capital markets business. And I think, underestimate the value of that for our clients, being able to bring new capital in as a proper investment bank into the business. And that's, of course, particularly attractive for MGAs who are looking at alternative sources of capital and how they actually underwrite their business. Yes, they could use insurance companies. Yes, they could review insurance companies, but bringing in alternative capital, particularly in areas of cat risk, is very important. And I think our focus on that, we control now on the reinsurance side over 6 billion of premium for MGAs, MGUs. It's a massive. That's excluding dual.
No, and so with Howden Re, it's just onwards and upwards and just keep going.
If you look at the way we've grown that business, obviously we had a very strong business to start with. Then we did the deal with Tiger, which brings in a very strong US treaty business. Then just before that, actually, Bradley Maltese joined us to create our London market business. Now, obviously, we've got Massimo Reina leading our international business, and we're really looking to power the growth of that business. Last year, that business was growing organically at 30%, so phenomenally powerful.
Oh, this is mad. I didn't know this is where it used to be.
Yeah.
So we're office number 2. Phoebe House, is that what you say?
Phoebe House. It's now called
F-I-B-I.
Church House, but it was Phoebe House, yeah.
What was Phoebe?
Phoebe is an Israeli company.
Oh, right. Okay, so it was actually it was a company you were sort of getting some stuff.
Yeah.
Had you opened up in your Israeli operations by then? Because that was...
We hadn't quite opened up, but we started doing business in Israel, but we hadn't actually opened in Israel. We opened in Israel in 2002. But we moved here 3 years after we moved into St. Dunstan's.
This is 97-ish.
97.
Yep.
There's only 20 of us. We're on the first floor of this little building. We thought we were very grand at the time. It was a big step up. There was a sort of downstairs receptionist. It was really quite something. And of course, here was where we then did our first ever acquisition. So Richard Lars ran Spear Gulland. He said to me, David, I'm afraid I'm selling Spear Gulland to Willis's. And I said, don't do that, Richard. Sell to me. He said, well, you haven't got any money. I said, I know, but I can give you some shares. And he said, shares? And I said, yes, I'll give you some shares. So dear Richard took some shares. We bought Spear Gulland, and that got us into retail. You remember, up until that time, we'd really been a wholesale broker. That got us into retail. It got us to start controlling our distribution. He had a major client base, particularly in Scandinavia, which we built on massively now. In fact, Den Norske Bank is still 30 years or 25 years after that deal, a client of ours. Next thing that happened, you'd be close to your heart, Mark, was that, of course, while we were here, Gillig Howell sold. They sold to Aon.
It's one of those sort of, oh God moments, I suppose, wasn't it? Oh, what are we going to do now?
Yeah, it was. Well, you think about it. Here we are, young people. There's 20 of us. Our biggest client is Gillig Howell. We're doing business in Spain. We're doing business in Latin America. And suddenly, oh my God, what's happened? Our supply lines are being cut off. So what do we do about that? From adversity, opportunity, Luis Minas-Rocas leaves Gillig Howell, and he comes and forms Jewel Iberica in Spain, setting up the MGA there in 97. And of course, from today, Jewel's growing from that one small office in Madrid right the way through to now 21 countries around the world.
And Luis is still around because I interviewed him in Madrid a couple of years ago, and he has not changed. Well, it's a bit like you, he hasn't changed at all. He's obviously slightly older, but that's
his beard's slightly greyer, isn't it? Yeah, but he hasn't changed at all. So that's it. So this was really important. 2 really important things happen when we're here. Moving to retail, formation of Jewel following the acquisition of Gillig Howell.
Yeah, and then here at investment, you've got Brian Marsh still, but are you getting any more investment around this stage? Or
So no, here we're still with Brian Marsh. Well, Luis became a bit of an investor as well. He did the startup with me and Jewel, which he invested money in, and then he put some money into the holding company as well. But no, it's not until 2008 that we bring in 3i, again, to sit alongside Brian Marsh rather than take Brian out, exactly.
So you did 5 years here, you started with 20 people. What did you end up with 5 years later?
So it seemed amazing at the time, but we were 5 times the size we were when we moved here. And so there was basically 100 of us when we left here, Mark, just over 100 of us.
Yes, right, we need to start walking
onwards, yeah.
This is good because we haven't got far. This is the next office is only just up the road.
And as we walk past our current office, which I'm sure we'll come to in a minute, Mark, but there's one CP, as we call it, one in Creek.
Yes, I think it's okay. I've got used to it being called one CP now.
Yeah,
I've got used to it.
Here we are on Bevis Marks now, yeah.
Well, yes, Bieber's office always used to be here. Oh, yeah, one thing. A story you've often told, probably since you became more famous, David, when you sort of headline conferences and things, you tell that story of at Pinnacle House, St Dunstan's with a dog. And remember, you had this kind of Paul on the way to Damascus kind of moment and said, well, what have I got? What have I got? I've got nothing, but I've got the London market. And I can sell that London market around the world as long as I can get distribution. What's the London market now, 30 years later? Do you think it's a better or worse asset to sell, or is it easier to sell than it used to be? It was quite a tough time then, actually. I was very optimistic of you. I was less optimistic about the market in 94, 95.
Yeah, I think, Mark, we know perfectly well it was very difficult times, you know. Your listener knows what was called reconstruction renewal was going on. There was a reasonable chance that Lloyd's was going to go bust. Names were up in arms over the losses coming out, the liability losses from asbestos, and David Rowland and others really had to dig deep to find out a solution, and luckily they came up with one. And that's really when Lloyd's started in some ways to really professionalise. And when I first started in the market back in the 80s, it was all individual syndicates, all backed by names. There were syndicates called the babies. It was a very different marketplace. 94, reconstruction renewal, corporate capital comes in, very different marketplace. What's also happening to the London market at the same time is consolidation. You know, you look at the brokers that were bought up in the 90s, those great names that you and I know of, you know, the Menets and the Cedricks, the Heaths, the Barings, they all got acquired.
Other than Heath, but it was probably Bain Clarkson, Leslie.
Yeah.
You make me feel really old trying to remember them all.
Yeah.
But yes, and it probably culminated with a big bang at the end. Johnson, Higgins, Skillicover, Howell. And then, of course,
Jack and Hubener, Blanc de Nicolai. So, you know, the market has changed dramatically since that time. If you look at the top 20 global brokers or the top 20 London market brokers, there's been huge change in that way. So it's a very different market today. The really encouraging thing about the London market is it is still absolutely the leading insurance market. Every single major broker has representation here. Every single major insurer and reinsurer has representation here. Lloyd's, as you know, is probably in a very strong position compared to where it was back in 1994, having had some record years. You've got, funnily enough, you just talked about it, Richard Brindle doing interesting things with combination of names capital coming back into the market. You're seeing names come back in. You're seeing corporate capital there too. So I think there's a lot the London market has to offer. Interestingly, the one thing the London market still never really successfully figured out, particularly as far as Lloyd's, was that whole distribution question. It's going to be interesting to see now, Mark, where we see the next wave of consolidation in the US. You think about what was going on internationally with Gilligan or Blanc, Jack and Hubener, Howden, Cedricks, Barings. The same thing's been happening in the US. You know, the formation post-Spitzer in 2004, you had then the formation of MMA, many of the big brokers, you know, becoming part of MMA, consolidation of that market. You then have the private equity houses coming in, consolidating the US market. And now what we're seeing is with the recent sale of McGriff to Marsh and NFP to Aon, further consolidation market into the large US PLCs.
So, David, this is office number 3.
It is indeed, Mark, yeah.
When you were here for a long time, this is number 24 Bevis Marks, just only a few hundred yards away again from where you last were. So how long are you here? This is a long time.
This is a long time. We did a decade here, actually. We moved in here with just over 100 people, and 10 years later we moved out with 10 times that 100 people, about 1,000 people. But a really important time for us in Bevis Marks, a lot going on. This is where we really began to expand our overseas offices. You know, fun enough, we're standing on Bevis Marks here, almost opposite the synagogue. And one of the things we've done on the back of our expertise in D&O, we've become very important as a wholesale broker originally in the Israeli D&O market, important market. And this is where actually we formed our joint venture in Israel with Davidoff to create our first office in Israel. But it's also where we looked to expansion in Asia. We knew we needed to grow in the growth markets. We acquired a business in 2012 called Asset, and we'd done that really just shortly after we bought in 3i as a growth capital in 2008.
And 3i also had quite an Asian focus, I remember, because of where they're behind Asia Capital Re and other things at the time.
They were in Asia, exactly that time. They were in Asia Capital Re with John Tan there, exactly that.
Yeah.
And 3i had come in 2008, again, not replacing Brian Marsh, but sitting long Brian to build us some growth capital into the business. I remember very well, that the business at the time they came in 2000 was valued at £97 million. I couldn't believe we'd achieved that. And they acquired 27%, which they put into the business, and we used that to grow the business.
Because it had been a long time since anyone had valued the enterprise of the business, the equity. It's easy when someone puts in, 27%, you can just multiply it and, divide that into 100 and then you get a number.
Yeah, exactly. And that was when we also, at that point, we'd done the deal with Richard Lars. He'd taken equity for his shares. Luis, as I said, when he formed Joule, put in capital. Louise, who had been one of the founders, was a shareholder, Mark and myself. But we began to then explore that whole thing of how we actually began to give shareholding to, and that was the start of it. When 3i invested, for the first time, we cut out what we didn't know at the time was called a sweet equity pot in those days, and we gave those shares to keep people in the business, and came on board. And we really began to do that thing of how do we really expand employee shareholder in the group.
Just because it was the first time you had actual significant pot of capital that you were able to use to do that.
Absolutely.
And that was obviously, and that had been by design.
But of course, what 2008 happened, Mark, as you well know, was the financial crisis. So they invested at the time, the financial crisis came along, and it took quite a while for us to really recover from that. Joule, our underwriting business at the time, had some quite big potential losses from PI and D&O that many people had in that market. So it was a difficult time for 3i entering.
And that took over Benfield then, as well, which was a big deal in the reinsurance space. Started that narrowing down of the reinsurance options for many people. And I suppose I do remember at the time you got, I think you took a team from what was Benfield Corporate Risks at the time. I remember being very pleased about that at the time. It was,
yeah, we did. And we looked to get into reinsurance at that time as well, actually. Just before that, we bought J.K. Buckingham's business.
Yes, I do remember
John
that,
Buckingham, and Joanna Buckingham's, they came across. So we always, back to Earlycon, we've always wanted to get into reinsurance. And so Benfield Falling, as you talk about, was really the last great independent reinsurance broker going.
So we're standing outside 16 East Street, very conveniently located opposite the insider offices, which we just moved to the corner of East Street as well.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that was convenient for you or not. Obviously, you had to scurry.
Be very careful who I was seen coming into the office with, Mark.
Me and Peter Hasty.
You and Peter calling me up saying, I understand you. And actually, of course, 16 East Street is where we did probably our first really big deal, where actually there was an article after that I said we were really truly trying to build a global broker that could compete with the big Americans, and we acquired Windsor's.
You bought Windsor's. I remember there was a story that then reporter Adam McNessie got that story, and that you were out in the countryside, I think maybe on a shooting party with John Bennett.
John Bennett, that's right, yeah.
Windsor's, and your mobile phone went off, and Adam said, "Look, we're just about to run the story. Have you got anything to say?" I presume nothing. About to acquire Windsor's, and then you sort of said, "Yeah, okay," rang off, put your phone back in your pocket, and got back on with business. And then, of course, John's phone immediately was standing next to you. His phone rang. Adam said, "Yeah, we were about to run the story." He was doing all his diligence, and of course,
he did not realise that we were standing next to each other at the time.
No, but that's the beauty.
Putting our fingers to our lips, saying, "Stay silent, don't say anything at all." But we did know by that stage that we had been rumbled. Yes.
Yeah, that was very, very good. So it was that, and then probably here the other big transformational deal that you did here would have been RK Harris.
Massive, yeah. So we moved in 2012. There were about 1,000 people in the group when we did so.
And what sort of revenues were you at then?
Probably about 100 million of revenue at the time, yeah. And then, of course, we did the Windsor deal. And then Arcade, which was really a true transformation deal. And that deal going, what was that story? It was all about distribution and expertise. They had huge expertise. They were by far the best London market broker, specialty broker, brilliant business built up. A lot of them having left JLT, led by Paul Bridgewater, but of course with Dominic Collins as their chairman. And Dominic recognised the need for Arcade to begin to think, how was it going to control its own distribution? We knew, as we wanted to build out our business, that we needed more expertise. And so it was the coming together, union of expertise and distribution. The two businesses came together, and that created for the first time a real new powerhouse in the business. And I think our combined revenues of the businesses then were approaching £250 million.
How long were you here?
So, Mark, we were here for about 7 years, as well as the Windsor deal here and the RKH deal. We also celebrated our 20th birthday here before we moved on.
And then, of course, this is also part of these deals where you had big external investors. It was a General Atlantic was around this time, early on.
Yes.
And then you probably celebrated the end with the sort of one of those crowning ones. Certainly when you get a Canadian pension fund, I always think, you've really made it. CDPQ.
Yeah. So as we mentioned earlier when we were at Church Place, bringing in right investors was important. We had Brian Marsh, who came on right at the beginning when we were in St Dunstan's Hill. Then here, yes, in that period, critical. We bought in 2008 3i. That was the time of the financial crisis. They weren't the greatest investors. I knew we needed more firepower. And so actually, shortly after we moved in here, Mark, we brought in General Atlantic, who came in, took out 3i, and is still with us now over 10 years later.
That's a good endorsement, I must say. Because I'm going to ask you about that.
But of course, also here, we then started to do that process of rather than actually changing our private equity, bringing more to sit alongside it. Whilst we were still here, Mark, we brought in CDPQ, the Canadian pension fund.
Yes. You were talking before about great US retail consolidation. But
Yeah.
I've got to come back to that question about, is it time for you to jump now that you're so big?
We go back to the story we've talked about, Mark. We've been building a business over a very long time around. It's all been about expertise and distribution. The expertise is people, really. We're talking about getting great people, great expertise, and then how do we distribute our product? We started as a wholesale broker, then we went into the MGA space, we've gone into the retail space, in the reinsurance space. The reality is that the US market is consolidating fast. We've just talked about that. NFP going to Aon, McGriff going to Marsh. So we need to make sure that whatever strategy we have in the next few years allows us to achieve what we want to be, which is a sustainable business built over the long term and remain independent. So we're watching closely what's going on over the other side of the Atlantic.
So it's certainly not off the table in the way it might have been 10 years ago if I'd asked you.
I think it would be very wrong of me not to make sure we're in control of our own destiny.
Well, you think there does come to a point where if you don't have it, then it could be an existential thing?
Yeah, ultimately, we need to survive as a business, and to do that, we need to strategically work out where are we going to get our clients from. Distribution, expertise. It's been the same, Mark, for 30 years. It hasn't really changed. And I learned the lessons of waiting for others to make action. Getting up Hal saying to Aon, when Richard Last is going to sell Spear Cullen, you look at it, you've got to have a strategy that you believe is going to allow you to build a business, independent business, over the very long term. We've done it for 30 years, we'll be doing it for another 30 years.
Right, let's start.
Let's walk on.
I'm getting cold.
Yeah, it is quite cold, isn't it?
30 years, you've got this new Vision 3030. What's that?
So 3030 is really our vision in our 30th year for what we want the company to look like by 2030, Mark. It's setting out our North Star, yeah?
So it's not quite a 5-year plan, it's a six-year plan.
It's a 6-year plan, Bit of poetic license there, yeah. It's a 6-year plan. And what we started with was not a set of numbers. We never start with the numbers. We've always said that was, people first, look after people, look after the clients, numbers look after themselves. So what we said is we want to build a great global business, a business that is truly global, but is people are proud of, yeah? And I think pride is something people understand. So a great global business we're proud of, the markets and clients love, because why wouldn't you want to build a business people like working with and for, It's very important. Culture is very, very important to us. But it is using, our collective power, collaboration, to change the way people think about insurance. We want to grow the insurance market. We think by then we'll be 10 billion of revenue, yeah? We'll have 3 billion of EBITDA, we'll have 40,000 people, half of whom we want to be shareholders in the business. So that's our vision of where we want to. You said earlier on that roughly, we double in size every 3 years, so we don't think that's at all unachievable. We've just passed the £3 billion revenue mark, yeah? We were 1 billion 3 years ago, yeah? And when we passed our 25th anniversary, which we did, we were 700 million. I said by then we wanted to be a 5 billion business, actually, 10 years from then. So that's our vision, what we want to achieve by 2030. And if I look across here, Mark, you can see what I guess you call the old JLT building, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, it was. And we moved into here in 1 CP, 1 Church Place, 2019. Just the beginning of 2019. And as you know, was then the momentous thing happened, in my view, for international brokers and for the London market, which was that JLT, the last remaining public, British, large, international insurance broker sold, and it sold to Marsh. And that to me was a real light bulb moment of, my gosh, the business we've been building over the last 25 years. We were just celebrating our 25th anniversary.
And it was gone.
Yeah, we weren't even $1 billion of revenue by then, Mark. We were about $700 million of revenue, and GLT was gone. Okay, and I thought, right, now we've got to move. We've moved fast always. Now we've got to move even faster. What are the key things we need to do to build a really, really credible alternative? First for talent, and then for clients. So one, leader in your home market, and that's why we got on and we did the deals with A-Plan and Aston Lark. You've asked me earlier about Howden on the high street. We've got 6,500 people, 200 offices in the UK. First thing. Secondly, really critical, we need to be important in Europe. Luis Struani came in, built up our European operatives. We're now in 25 countries in Europe. Really a European powerhouse business. Thirdly, reinsurance. We needed to be a credible alternative to the existing large reinsurance brokers. And we talked about that earlier. We built that in nearly 1,000 people now, $600 million of revenue almost. We're really important to have a strong reinsurance business. And the final bit was global specialties, So Sarah Hughes leads our specialty business. Building that out so we've got real global specialties to offer to clients. Those are the 4 critical things we need to do. We spent the last 5 years doing that. Here we are today, $3 billion of revenue.
And the other thing obviously behind that is there's capital, there've been new investors coming in, few exits, or not really exits, but takedowns, and obviously 3i was out, and obviously Brian Marsh was out a long time ago. But can you keep rolling that capital the way things are? Can you get to that 10 billion revenue and still be a private company in that sense, and still just have a slightly larger consortium of supporting investors?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So by the time we move in here in 2019, we bought in, as we said earlier, General Atlantic 2012, CDPQ long time 2017. Then when we're here, we bring in HG Capital. So when we do the A-Plan deal, HG roll, they also put in an additional, actually 500 million of new capital into the business. And actually CDPQ and GA also put in fresh capital, And and obviously as well as the outside investors, we've got by now thousands, well today about 5,500 of our colleagues around the world as shareholders in business. So making sure we've got enough capital to grow the business has always been critical. We've invested billions, literally, in the UK, in Europe, in building the business. So as we look forward, making sure that the right capital base is going to be critical for us. What is important to us is the shareholder base, the working employees. Whether we're actually private or whether we're public or how we get our capital, I don't think is the key thing. It's about actually, we already have public debt. We did our first public bond issue recently as well. So for me, I'll always be focused on having the right capital base for the growth of the business. As we move towards that 2030 goal and 10 billion of revenue, that's going to be a company that's going to be worth 50 billion or something. And then we'll have to see what's the right capital base for that company.
I suppose, yes, as long as people who need liquidity have liquidity.
Yeah.
Because obviously you can't sit on paper forever and you can't spend Howden shares.
Yeah.
So as long as they have the liquidity, is it something more a question of crossing the bridge when you come to it?
Yeah, but also we've always made sure people have liquidity, because I think it's very important now, because paper, just for the sake of it. So we have every year we have an internal market. People can buy and sell their shares. Last year, 1,600 people wrote out a check to buy a share. Also, hundreds of people accessed the market. We bought back about £250 million of the shares from our colleagues, so they could buy a new house, invest in their children's education, or what do they want to do?
Or some are retiring. And
or retire, And I think liquidity is incredibly important. And having that, I always think the business where you've got to wait for the big deal to happen for you to have liquidity is not right. So we've always had an internal market. The shares are valued professionally by Morgan Stanley every year. That market's open up. I think that's important. But, there isn't much point having a bit of paper if you can't actually ever cash it in.
Absolutely. No, that's good. So it's all about getting that liquidity. And of course, the big liquidity is obviously for some of those big investors at some point. They can't hold forever, can they? Again, for them, they can look at this fantastic gain that they've had. Probably someone like General Atlantic must be on a fantastic multiple bagger.
Yeah, they're very good. Well, General Atlantic invested at £5 a share. The latest internal market we had was £50 a share. And actually, Richard Lars, I think, invested at 20 pence a share. 3i was at £2, and all the colleagues, and there were many of them who rolled their record. And remember, almost always when we do a deal, we're not actually buying businesses. We're actually merging with entrepreneurial talent, just like we with Arcade. And all those people from Arcade who rolled their shares into Howden, entrusting us 10 years ago now. Their share rolled in at £5.72. It's now £50. Not a bad deal.
Let's go and have a break.
Shall we?
Get out the cold, have a cup of coffee, and then we'll catch up on whatever questions I've forgotten to ask you.
Yeah. Well, opposite, named after me, of course,
Dave's.
Well, Dave's Wine Bar, because I hate
yet.
being called Dave. So it was Andy Bergoli, who's worked, joined us in 1997 or whatever, who thought it'd be very funny to take the mickey out of me and call the wine bar Dave's. So you haven't been to Dave's yet?
And he still works for you.
You haven't been to Dave's yet? Well, come on,
I haven't
Mark.
been to Dave's. I haven't been to Dave's.
That's great. No, it's fantastic.
Actually, people have been talking about Dave's. I think it's
Dave's
pretty
really
good.
cool. Look at this. It's all about, the ethos of really great
I hope
food.
it's got nice heating.
Yeah, let's go
The
inside.
central heating works.
It's push, Mark.
Right,
Don't
push.
pull.
Sorry,
Yeah.
can't pull. Right, let's sit down in the corner.
Oh, it's nice and warm in here. So cold out there, yeah. What would you like, Mark?
David, another thing, most people when they've done more than 30 years, or a continental European CEO when they hit 60, it's sometimes sort of written to their constitution of the company, or even sometimes into their own employment law, they just start winding down. Obviously, more Anglo-Saxon, we don't tend to do that. And obviously on the other side of the pond, probably, we've got people in their 90s who are very successfully running businesses. So would there come a time when you'd ever consider not doing it?
So look, I'm 60 years old, as you probably know. So, and I've been building this business now for 30 years. So half my life building this business up. We celebrated our 30th anniversary at home at Cornbury. We had a big parties. We do parties well. We do business building well, and we do parties well at home. We had a huge party at home. All the key colleagues from around the world, and my wife and children were there. And I said very openly that, I have two families, and I'm very grateful for my real family for the support they've given me over all the years as I build the business. But I'm passionate about Howden as a business. It is part of it.
It comes with the package. It's part of the deal. They know what you're like, and they know you are going to be jetting off somewhere.
Yeah, and they're very involved in many ways, And so I think that ultimately, as long as I'm passionate about the business, as long as we're building something, I talked about our vision 3030. Let's build a great global business we're proud of. And I think pride is an incredibly important thing. So as long as I'm proud of what we're doing, as long as we're building a great business and I'm enjoying it, and quite frankly, as long as I'm useful as well, I'm going to carry on doing this for quite some time. It's fun.
Those things, it sometimes becomes painfully obvious that you're not any use.
Yes, and then hopefully that'll be the job when my chairman's job is to tap me on the shoulder and say, David, thank you so much for everything you've done, but really I think it might be time to go out and carry on doing a bit more of my farming or something. But no, joking apart, to me, we've done an incredible achievement, but I want to see through that 2030 ambition. I want to see us really build a business that isn't just a great global insurance business, Mark, but it's a great global business. I'm passionate that you can build a business with employee ownership at the heart of it, where people love the business, they care about it, where culture's our most valuable thing. If we could do that at real scale, having been a startup, that would be something I'll look back and go, actually, I am quite proud of that.
And what things still get you excited? I mean, we're in a really interesting London market at the moment. There's so much technology, things like the Lloyd's Lab, lots of innovation, and now innovation of being actively encouraged at Lloyd's, for example, and being allowed for it with 5% of the syndicate stamp, that kind of thing. I mean, it's a unique time. Are you more excited than usual about what's going on, and which parts of it get you more excited?
I think for me, this, I talk an awful lot about making sure that we as the insurance industry stay relevant. And we're living in a more and more uncertain times, whether that's around climate, whatever your views are of why the climate's changing, it's changing. Look what just happened in the last couple of days in the UK alone. Whether it's around technology and cyber and the risk around that. I was talking to a risk manager of a major bank. His major concerns still around supply chains because of geopolitical issues, and around climate because they lend to properties, and around cyber because they're a big financial institution. These risks are out there. The opportunity, how many other industries have the opportunity we have as the insurance industry to be relevant right across the board in so many areas? And I think it's our duty, to innovate, to embrace change, to actually allow to come up and take the risks off the balance sheet that capital doesn't want to take. People often think of insurance as being after the event. Yes, of course we're there for that. In the event of, the car accident, or in the event of the storm damage, etc. But really, the real secret source of insurance is encouraging investment and encouraging change and technology and development. And that's because capital, whether it's private equity, whether it's stock market capital, whether it's banks, they want certain risks removed before they make that investment. And that's our job. And I think that's the real exciting part of it. So we should be at the center of any revolution that's going on. We were there in the day of the steam boilers, making sure that we allow them to be safe and therefore actually continue when they were blowing up all over the place. We've been there right the way through. And so, yes, the technology revolution is something we should play our part in.
What about AI? I mean, I remember we once having a conversation with you about when you fully digitize a market, you remove all the friction. And at that point, like what we've seen with stockbroking. I mean, we had that conversation.
Yes,
absolutely.
I remember.
Sort of Robin Hood
Asset
broking.
managers, they've structured
getting to zero cost of
Yeah.
trading. Do you think you can see an insurance market where we might have a zero cost of trading, which might mean zero brokerage, which would mean you would have to go fully fee earning at that point?
We're moving painfully slow, aren't we, Mark? That is the reality. You think how far the market moved, but there are green shoots. We have got follow markets coming on. We have got syndicates like Key now running a lot on the follow. It's got to be the natural way to go. There is too much friction, and therefore what we want to call cost, where we're not providing any real value. And I think using technology to make sure that we're as efficient as possible for our clients and therefore our products priced and we charge for where we add the value rather than just the shoe leather of a broker walking around the market like you and I did years ago with the slipcases under our arms.
There's still going to be people, there isn't going to be some sort of Howden bot that just pops up and you just type what you want into it.
If we didn't believe this was a people business, we wouldn't be opening offices in the high street, would we? I mean, if anyone proves the belief in people are the expertise, They should be supported by all the technology that's needed. And of course, clients want data. We've just employed a new COO. David Shoulders has joined us from the London Stock Exchange Group. As you probably know, the London Stock Exchange Group is much more of a data business than these days an exchange. And David's job of coming in is really helping us to go on the next level of our journey around data and analytics and how we can use that for the benefit of the clients to assess their risk, decide how they should insure, not insure, cost pricing and all of that. So there's massive things we can do around technology, but I'm still a big believer in people.
And you have to keep pushing all that information and help down all the way through the organisation, all the way right to the high street, for example.
Right, high street. Right. So, to give you an example, on the high street, you would think, well, actually, what an old-fashioned business you are. Having offices on the high street and having people love it. Our organic growth on the high street is phenomenal. Our renewal retention rate here is in the 90%. You ask some of the comparison websites what their renewal retention rate is. It won't be 90%, Mark, I can tell you.
No, they're churning away, aren't they?
Exactly. So we're offering advice and expertise. But behind it, we've got incredible technology. So you're in there on the high street, it's nice, good feeling, but the reality is our systems are able to give you comparable quotes. They're able to tell our colleagues there what policies you buy with us, what recommendations you would do. We're using technology for voice conversations around actually tone of conversation. Is this conversation going well or badly? Should we change the tone? So it looks like old-fashioned Howden on the high street, but behind it, there's really good technology and really good data and analytics.
And I suppose you can be distributing very sophisticated products through there.
Yeah, you talked about earlier on, Mark, ultimately, why are we on the high street? We're on the high street for our personal customers. We've got millions of personal customers in the UK. But we're very interested in serving the local community. And that's everything from the small business owner, the builder, or the decorator, or the hairdresser.
Well, they've all got liability insurance questions and things.
They've all got cyber. What's one of the issues we've got? We know perfectly well that there's just not enough small businesses buying cyber insurance. They all got cyber. What's happening with flood damages? They've all got insurance products they need. And how much nicer, better, more efficient to be able to walk into an office and talk to someone or pick up the phone and know they're there. I think it's very important.
And anything else you've got to add there in terms of other things you're particularly excited about?
So look, we've touched upon it, but I do think our role in the transition is incredibly important. The reality is we have got to transition towards a net zero. We can't do it by shutting off fossil fuels. We know that. That's not the answer because there isn't enough renewables energy in the world to supply the people. But What we do need to do is work out how we transition, and the insurance industry has a massive role to play in that. And that's why we've made a huge investment in our climate risk and resilience division, with Rowan Douglas coming in to lead that division. We've got about 80 people in that, really with working with clients to say, how can we do that? How can, again, back to my earlier point about innovation, we launched the first ever insurance product to insure the liability from carbon capture and storage, because unless, again, it's going to be insured, people are going to make those investments. So I think I'm very excited about the opportunity for us in the industry. I think in addition to that, I think there's a whole thing around technology and cyber. We've all been advocates of the cyber market and the growth of it, but the reality is it is the absolute risk that all businesses, small or large, know they face, and insurance can offer proper confidence solutions, not just in paying the claims, but how to manage the risk. And I think that's a huge growth area.
Yes, it's certainly your investment on the transition side. It certainly looks way beyond something that is just you trying to look good for ESG or kind of, greenwashing purposes. When you're talking about 80 people, it's a real
definitely
commitment.
not greenwashing.
It's not cheap, is it?
It's definitely not green. It's not cheap, and it's a real investment. And I think also, Mark, it is about this. I've used the term before. There is a side that when insurance can prove it's a force for good and do things that are of real value and importance, there is a commercial side to that as well, both in terms of the talent we attract in. One thing, we haven't really talked about a lot is talent. We attract a lot of talent into our company, but it's not enough. I want to reach out to an even broader, even more diverse group of people who actually for the first time say, do you know what, I think insurance is really interesting. I think it's really exciting. I think it makes a difference to the world. A lot of young people I talk about, yes, they need money, everything, but they have some other things that are important drivers to them. So I think if as an industry, we can be seen to being a force for good, playing our role in these particular areas. One, I think we can actually make profit out of it. But secondly, we can be a more attractive industry for the talent we want to attract. One of the things we're proudest with our new sponsorship for the British and Irish Lions is actually our engagement in the community. To give you some idea, there's about 700 origin clubs, which is where, the great Lions of the past have come from, that were...
So these are rugby clubs?
Rugby clubs. These are rugby clubs, Mark.
But like local community?
Local community. About 700 in the UK alone. We're dealing with hundreds or so overseas. Local community. We're engaged with the local community, getting involved, helping...
So you're buying kit and putting up posts?
The lovely thing we're doing, one woman said, is the cost of rugby boots is really expensive. So what we said, okay, what we'll do is we'll start up an exchange. So we bought some rugby boots, we put them in our offices, and then people can come in and take a pair of boots, that fits their growing child up. But in replacement, they give their old pair of boots so someone else can use theirs. Really simple things, people love it.
How long is that sponsorship going to go on for?
So, the Lions is,
is it a 4-year cycle?
It's a 4-year cycle. Yeah, obviously they're going down to Australia in 2025. We're really proud, though, that we're the inaugural tour sponsor for the British and Irish Women's Lions, which is going to be in New Zealand in 2027. So really proud of that. Obviously, I think everyone's really excited about the rugby now. Wales got walloped by the Wallabies. England lost. As you know, Howden is a Scottish name, so I'm very pleased that the Scots won at the weekend. But it's going to be a really proper contest down there in Australia in the summer of 25.
Well, it's good. No, yes, it's all about teamwork.
It's all about teamwork. It's all about pride. And the British and Irish Lions, it's about union. The best of the English, the best of the Scots, the Welsh, and the Irish coming. And anyone loves the best of the best. And we're a great British business, but we're very global, as you know, Mark. We're in 55 countries around the world. So to have really the absolute pinnacle of rugby, going to Australia, that's what we want to get behind. And the pride, I talk about pride in building business. You talk to people like Gavin Hastings or Ian Evans, these people who play for the Lions. This is their proudest moment, pulling on that red shirt, And for me, to see the Howden name on that amazing pleasant shirt, it's fantastic.
David, thanks so much for your time. It's nice to have a good walk and a good chat on a sunny but chilly morning. Thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Oh, Mark, thank you very much. And I'll leave you with one little memory about...
Any poetry this time?
Yeah. So no poetry. This is about, actually celebrating business and, that two families. So, at the 30th anniversary, night before the party, now there I am thinking, 30 years building this business. I'm with my wife, Fiona. We're lying in bed, just reading books, nothing in his hands. It's a clean show you operate here, Mark, I know that. So I'm there, and I said to Fiona, did you ever think in your wildest dreams that I'd build the company of this size? And she laid her book down, looked across to me and said, David, you never appeared in my wildest dreams. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, David. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, don't forget to subscribe or leave a like or a review or recommendation on whatever podcast platform you used to access this program. These really help get the word out. Before we go, just a quick reminder that advertising slots are available here and in other places in the Voice of Insurance podcasts. Podcasting is the fastest growing medium and attracts a high quality audience of key decision makers. It's also an intimate medium where you, the listener, are right in the room with me and the interview subjects. Needless to say, that means it's a great way of getting your message out directly to an audience because you know you've got their full attention. It's also very cost effective. So get in touch with Mark at thevoiceofinsurance.com to find out how you could be speaking directly to the industry. The Voice of Insurance podcast is produced in association with Advantage Go, enabling enterprise-scale underwriting through a single pane of glass. Voice of Insurance is produced by me, Mark Gagan. Music was written by Anna Gagan and produced by Carlos Gagan. Check out more podcasts and written comment pieces at www.thevoiceofinsurance.com.